Welcome to the AI argument. I'm Frank Prendergast. I'm here with my co-host, Justin Collery. Justin,
Evening,
how
Frank.
are you getting on?
I'm pretty good. It's been a great week, so it has loads of interesting stuff, lots to get through. And yeah, it's been a good week for AI.
Cool. I had a fun week with AI myself. I decided I wanted to try out a new AI video tool that everyone was talking about, called Minimax, and so I ended up making a little video using a whole bunch of tools to create like a little AI avatar of myself. So I started with AI images, brought them in to the AI video tool, and I was kind of creating this little, kind of like a little tribute / parody of the Firestarter video by The Prodigy from the 90s. So created these images, did a face swap to make them look a bit more like me, gave them to the video generator, edited them together, popped them up on LinkedIn. And, I just assumed, because I talk about AI all the time. I mentioned at the end of the post that it was an AI avatar, and the videos were watermarked with the Minimax AI watermark. But we don't pay that much attention. We don't pay very close attention on social media. And so I assumed everyone would just know this was AI. But I got all these comments that made me think, hang on, people think this is actually me. And shortly after I posted, I hopped on a call with a long-term client of mine who knows me for years, knows me in person, not just from Zoom calls. I've been to her conferences and everything, and she said to me, I got a great laugh out of your LinkedIn today. That was such a great video. Where did you shoot it?
So just walk me through what you did again, right? Because I saw the video and that was exactly my reaction as well, right? I didn't realize that it was AI, and I work with AI every single day because that, it's a bit like people always read the headline and never the details, right? And you just sort of look at it, you take it at face value. So, but I'm just interested to know how you did it. So you said, was it your voice, or was it an AI voice, or was it the original music that you used?
So there was no voice per se. It was, sorry, excuse me. I used Suno to create the music. So I used a whole bunch of AI tools to do this, basically. So I started with Midjourney. I used the character reference parameter in Midjourney so that it would use a photograph of me to create the character. I then used a second tool to do an actual face swap. So now that the character looks kind of broadly like me, but Midjourney won't do like kind of deep fake stuff. So it makes it look a little bit like you. That makes it easier then to do a face swap and make it look a little bit more like me. Then I take those images into the video generator and I give it a prompt, punk dancing. And it generates a video with someone who looks a little bit like me dancing. And then I edit it together.
Right? I watched the video and I mean, my initial reaction was, Frank's an actor. I would have thought he'd been a better dancer than that.
This is something I, probably shouldn't admit, but I'm afraid I actually wish I was that good of a dancer.
And what tool did you use to generate the movement then?
Sorry, say that again.
What tool did you use to generate the movement?
That was one called Minimax from it's from a company called, what are they called? I don't know how to pronounce it. Hailuo AI.
From China,
and it's one, I believe so. And yeah, it's one that just everyone was talking about. So I was curious to see how it would perform. And they had a really nice free trial. So on the first day of your free trial, you get infinite generations, which is nice. It's a nice way to actually be able to test it out. The only drawback is because you're on the free version, you're put into a queue. So you could be waiting up to 15 minutes for something to generate.
Okay, well, I could tell you, I thought if people haven't seen the video already, they should go and look at the video, because I think it was a brilliant video. And if you go and look at it, to me, it looked like a real video. I thought that you'd gone down to where it was in a sewer or something like that, and I thought you'd gone somewhere and shot it on location. Like it looked. Amazing. But you were also doing this week some interesting research into AI trends in Ireland in relation to the searches that people are doing related to AI.
Yeah, that was, yeah. So just a minute ago, I was on a call with a friend of mine, Pepper Brooks, and she suggested that we have a look on Google Trends to see, what were people searching for in relation to AI. And we looked at Ireland, and we looked at in the past day, and then we broadened it out because we thought, okay, you know what? The past day might be misleading for some reason. There might have been something in the news or whatever. So we broadened it out. We looked at 30 days. It didn't change the overall trend, which was everything that was being searched for was either how to detect AI generated content or how to escape AI generated content. So I think that we are looking at a battle between students and educators who are trying to figure out, how can I write my essay with AI but not have the educational institution figure it out? And the educators are like, how on earth do we figure out what's AI generated? And I didn't realize. When you look at the amount of queries that are to do with these things, you realize just how much of an issue it is.
How many? Give me a number.
Oh, I don't have them to hand now. I'd have to have a look. But literally every single. So what was happening was I noticed a lot of tools that I hadn't heard of before. So myself and Pepper would go and search for the same query to see what that tool was. Every single time, it was either detect AI or humanize AI to avoid detection. Every single time. I mean, it was crazy. It was really crazy. And then that was on top of terms like things like, how do I detect an AI essay, or how do I escape AI detection, or how do I get ChatGPT to write in a way that escapes detection, or queries to do with a tool called Turnitin, which I know educators are using to detect AI essays. And in fact, I think I was in a taxi the other day, and I heard a student complaining that she had been flagged for writing with AI, and she doesn't use AI. She knows nothing about AI. And, okay, let's face it, maybe she was lying, but I don't see why. I don't see why she would go on the radio and lie about this. And she said that, she had certain personality traits that meant that her writing, she wrote in a particular style, which just happened to be very similar to how AI would write something. So she said she just has this style, and all of her
favorite word.
Elevate.
Delve was her favorite word.
Delve and elevate.
Ethan Mollick, right, who's a professor over in the US and studies AI a lot, talks about this quite often. And he says that it's better not to even try to detect if it's AI, because you can't reliably detect it, and you're going to do exactly as that lady had experienced. You're going to call out more people that have totally written this themselves and accuse them of something they haven't done. And I've got another interesting personal story just to boost what you were saying, which was there was I heard through an uncle of mine this week that a teacher in Sligo who teaches English in secondary school asked his class, he said, look, there's no penalty for this. There's going to be no comeback, or there's going to be no, sanction. But I just need to understand from you, how many people in this class have used AI to help them with their English homework? Every single hand in the class went up. And so I think there's a huge shift. There's clearly something going on. It's not often talked about, right? It's not something we talk about, all the sort of fun stuff like, the flame throwing robots and stuff like that. And we don't actually talk about what's going on down at the grassroots, which is people just using AI to do their day-to-day work. And, the teachers and the department, schools ban phones, right? You're not allowed to use phones. And it seems to me like, what do we want to teach our children to do? And maybe the better way to tackle this is just to admit that, look, this is a tool. And so all exams are going to be open book exams. And you know what? Use your phone too. Knock yourself out. But you're going to be judged on the quality of how you use the tool in order to get to, the answer that you want to get to. It's a brilliant, let's see, here, for instance, I'm not great at Irish. The kids have their Irish homework. I'll just take a photo of the page and give it to ChatGPT and say, can you give me the answers, please? I mean, what else am I supposed to do to help my kids? So I think there's a shift to come in education, and I don't know what the right answer is, but we need to grapple with it. There's no point in denying that this exists. You can't stick your head in the sand. So somebody, and I think Ethan Mollick is sort of at the forefront of sort of saying, this is happening, education systems need to change, but I haven't seen sort of a clear description of how they should change yet. But very interesting. There's definitely things going on under the radar, I think.
Is this a first that on a highly controversial topic, it would seem as if we are in full agreement?
It seems so. Let's move on.
Yeah, because I totally agree. Like, detection isn't going to cut it. But the problem is, the other alternative is a complete overhaul of the educational system so that students are assessed in a completely different way. And that's going to be a long time coming. So this is going to be a problem for quite a while before we see it resolved.
Sure. It is. We'll get there. Let's move on to a Hero of the Week award. It's the inaugural Hero of the Week award. And this week, I am nominating Judge Colleen McMahon for the Hero of the Week award. So Colleen McMahon is a judge in New York, and there was a case between a small AI company called OpenAI and a company called Raw Story. And what they had claimed was very similar. I think it's the New York Times also have a case against OpenAI to say that the AI is plagiarizing their work. Basically, it's violating their copyright. And this week's hero, Judge Colleen McMahon, dismissed the case, threw it out of court. And it was very interesting, the reasoning as to why she dismissed it. So what she said was two things that were interesting. The first thing she said was that earlier versions of the product could violate their copyright, but that they had done sufficient work to stop later iterations. So that was the first thing, right? They'd shown good cause. And the second thing was that she believed, and this is a legal person talking, that the language model synthesized the data. And so it, downloaded, as they said, the entire internet. And when you asked it a question, it wasn't just answering from the New York Times. It wasn't just answering from Raw Story. It was actually synthesizing all of those sources to give you back a piece of original content, which would have been made up partly from, a number of different sources. And therefore, she threw out the case. Now, this has, I think, huge implications. But what's your thoughts on the story first?
I think my thoughts are, it's really interesting to see. It's not a result from a case because it was dismissed before it ever got to the courts. But it's really interesting to have such a kind of a concrete example of, no, this was not infringement. I think the complexities around, we'll probably see a whole load more cases for all of the different possible infringements. So I think this was mostly about the output. So the next thing that we're going to be looking at, so it'll be really interesting, exactly as you say, what's the impact of this dismissal on the New York Times case, which is kind of similar, that they're saying, the output is actually infringing. But then we still have all of those cases about the input, about the training data. So that will be interesting. And there was a piece published by another ex-OpenAI staffer. And I think it was last week he published this. He left OpenAI and he published a blog post saying that he left because he did not believe that it was ethical to train on the data that they were training on. And he went through all of the reasons why it did not constitute fair use.
Could I just summarize what he said? Because that was an interesting point that he had. So he said that when they were a research organization, it was totally fair game to download the entire internet, copyrighted material and all, and then to use that for research purposes. But as soon as you start to charge people money in order to, consume ChatGPT and other things, then the fact that you've downloaded all that copyrighted material, it means it's not okay to do that. That was his central argument, which was interesting. I mean, it's a bit persuasive.
So I think, yeah, I think it's a really interesting dismissal, but I think we need more court cases to, we'll see what the rest of the court cases in relation to the output of AI, how they go, and then we still have the whole input question to be answered by the courts as well. So I think this is an interesting indication of which way the courts are going to lean, but I wouldn't put too much weight on it just yet.
Yeah, I think the winds are blowing against you on this one now. I think the winds of change in the US are blowing towards making this stuff okay. I think that, the backdrop, because it's all
Mm.
becoming political to a certain extent. And I think the political winds are blowing to this is going to be allowed. I think that's where it's going to go. There was two other interesting stories, just because I do want to get onto the Minecraft story and stuff like that. But there was two
Mm.
linked stories that I'd like to talk to. The first story is a Polish radio station. This week fired all of their journalists. Not a good week for the journalistic industry, you'd have to say, and replaced them all with AI. And then a second thing happened this week where the New York Times staff were on strike. And I should point out that these were the technical staff. So the IT guys, the justos of this world, were on strike. And the CEO of Perplexity offered to provide his AI system in order to make up for the shortfall of work that the striking workers weren't doing. He was going to cross the picket lines, essentially. Now, I think culturally, both of those things are super interesting, because what they do is they point to a future which is happening right now, or is, we're on the precipice of a future that's happening right now, where if you decide to go on strike, companies just go around and say, fine, we'll just get AI to do the job instead. And I don't think that's a healthy dynamic, but it's a very interesting dynamic. And then it's the devaluation of work. So work is becoming commoditized. And it's everybody. I mean, if you look at it from both your sort of creative side and my technical side, you've got the Polish radio station getting rid of journalists, and the New York Times being offered technical staff by Perplexity. So it's on all sides of the spectrum that this is potentially happening.
And something that struck me, another kind of similarity, if you like, between the two stories that struck me was the convoluted justifications in both stories for like why this was okay. So in the case of the radio station, they justified it by saying that the two things were completely unrelated and the media had linked them, and that in actual fact, the journalists had to go because the business was failing. And the whole idea of having AI journalists was a last-ditch attempt to save the radio station with the resources that they had. Like, you can see the logic, but it still means people's jobs were lost and AI is now doing the job. Similarly with the Perplexity one and the Perplexity / New York Times one, I didn't fully understand that story because I didn't really fully understand how Perplexity could like step in and what were they actually offering. I didn't quite understand, but I do know that when people reacted badly to it and said, well, you're just crossing the picket line, that means, Perplexity is now a scab. The official response was, oh, no, we're offering support of this nature, which doesn't replace the people who are striking. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It sounds very much to me like you're just going in and having AI do their jobs. So these convoluted kind of justifications for why it's okay, we're going to probably hear a lot more of those.
You do. I think, and I mean, we've talked about this before. We've got these difficult teenage years of the AI transition where we're just coming to the end of the period where it's this cool tool and it hasn't really impacted anybody. And we're hoping to get to the sunny uplands where it does all of the boring work that we don't want to do and we're all wealthier as a result. But that transition period in the middle is when we're likely to get a lot more stories like this. And there's going to be winners and losers, and there's going to be insiders and outsiders and haves and have-nots. And that's going to become very challenging over the next couple of years, I think, to manage. So interesting times ahead.
Yeah, there was one tiny little thing that I'd love to link into this, because you found that clip of a guy talking about how AI, even in its current form, in a way, could end up being having the status of a natural person.
Brilliant.
if you incorporate because if you incorporate a company in the States, it has certain rights as a, in inverted commas, person. Isn't that right? A natural, yeah.
It's the same
And
in
so
every
his
country.
point was,
It's a separate legal entity.
so if you create a company and then put AI in charge and it has certain rights, now he was doing this extrapolating, well, what if the AI makes all the decisions for the company, has an AI agent that does certain tasks, makes money, invests the money, makes a load of money, and then has the right, under the American Constitution, has the right under free speech to donate that money to a particular political candidate. So he laid out this kind of scenario, but it also just I think, we could be a lot closer to AI taking human jobs and having human rights. We could be a lot closer to that than we thought we were, which is kind of mind-blowing.
It's a fascinating thought experiment, right? Because let's say I was to say to you, Frank, do you think that an AI will have a legal personality anytime soon?
And I would say no, not anytime particularly soon.
You wouldn't think so, right? That'd be the natural. No, not at all, right?
Yeah.
And, I could imagine in the next 12 months, you could set up a company. And so the company has its own distinct legal entity, right? It's separate from you, the person. And then within a company also, you have this idea of executive control. So for instance, if you have a company that's incorporated in Ireland, like a lot of big multinationals are, they must hold board meetings in Ireland in order to say that, yes, it's actually an Irish company. So the people have to physically come. And then you have this concept of executive control. So as the executive, you are making decisions which are impacting on that company. So I've created a company that is now a separate legal entity, and I'm just going to give executive control to the AI. I'm not going to do anything. So I'm not involved in the company. I might own shares of the company, but I'm not making any of the decisions. The AI is making all the decisions. So at that point, I would make an argument that the AI is a legal entity by proxy. So it itself doesn't have any legal rights, but it's controlling something which does have legal rights as an individual, and it can then go and do things. Now, me as a director, I'm going to be liable for what it does. That's just the law as it stands at the moment. But I think it's it sort of, once you get to that point, then it starts to become an interesting argument. Well, why doesn't have the AI have its own, legal rights and its own personality? And I think, as you say, that's going to be something that's going to come up in the next, I think, in 12 months. Like this is the year of agents. There's been lots of stories this week as well about agents coming. Google are going to release an agent in the next couple of months, in the next month, by the way, in December. OpenAI have said they're going to start releasing agents. Anthropic have done it with their computer use API. So this is happening. It's live. So I would imagine in the next 12 months, this is going to be a very interesting and real question. So, and do you know what, actually, as I think about it, and I'm thinking out loud, right, even though the AI would have its own company and it's controlling it, I still gave it the instructions. So I still think it's reasonable to say that I'm responsible for what it does because I told it. So this is I was just doing what I was told, boss argument. The boss is ultimately responsible. So I think that's maybe where it'll end up. But it's a fascinating, thought experiment for the moment, but not for long.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I was just thinking about this in relation to some of the other stories that you highlighted around AI being used in defense situations, and thinking about the responsibility issue that you just highlighted.
As I said, it's been a wonderful, wonderful week for AI. So, and as you know, I mean, nothing makes me more excited than the Terminator and an AI in control of a flame-throwing robot dog or something like that. I just love these stories. So a couple of really interesting stories come up this week. First, my favorite AI company, Anthropic, who are the Canada of AI companies. Everybody loves them. They can't do anything wrong. It's like,
the Tom Hanks of AI companies.
OpenAI are the US. They're a bit more crass and they're allowed and stuff like that. But Anthropic are always doing the good thing,
I hope my wife Marcy isn't listening to this episode. the least crass person that I know.
But so this week they signed a deal with Planetaire, I think is what the company is called, which is a big US defense company. And they are going to use Anthropic's AI to help them process large amounts of data so that they can target Frank Prendergast even quicker and better than they could have targeted it before. So that's very interesting. I think actually, in seriousness, this all speaks to the intersection now that we have between politics and AI. Meta this week also changed their terms of service to say that it's absolutely okay to use their models for defense purposes in the US only. And following on that, then a company called Scale AI released a tuned version of the Meta AI system specifically for military or defense purposes. So
that's,
I mean,
isn't that really interesting when you think about it? As in, like, so Meta changed their terms of service in order to be able to work with defense and military.
Yep.
But if they hadn't, somebody else probably would have done it with their open source models, as
Scale AI did. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a weird situation, isn't it? That, like, yeah, I mean, when I was trying to get my head around these agreements in military situations, I popped some of the articles into ChatGPT, and I was asking it, well, what is the AI actually going to be used for in the case of in the Anthropic case? And it said, well, it'll mostly be used for decision making in military situations. And I said, what uses do Anthropic's terms of service prohibit? And it gave me a list of things, and one of them was it prohibits the use of their AI in high-risk situations. And I was like, are military decisions not high-risk situations? And ChatGPT basically said that, well, yes, they probably could be, but these companies will equivocate and find ways around, find ways to justify it. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
You can think about it. Okay, in a military situation, though, I can give you a good example, right? And how this could be used for good. So you could imagine, you could get war games, basically, right? So you've got a geopolitical situation. You've got China, Russia, America, a couple of other actors. There's some sort of a standoff somewhere. I mean, you could use AI really usefully to role play all of the different wants, needs, and desires of each of those players, and basically gamify it in order to find what the best outcome would be or what the next best move would be. And obviously, you're doing it in a way to resolve it before you get to conflict. So, I mean, it's a very powerful tool potentially for doing things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually agree with you there. I think in terms of, training or, training for very specific situations, training in much more realistic scenarios, I think that's a great idea. But my fear is that that's not what they're talking about. My fear is that they're talking about using it in the situations as opposed to prepare for them.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, I think it just in the world that we're heading into now, again, I just go back and give out about Europe. What the hell are we doing? China's firing ahead with it. America's firing ahead with it. We're going to be just a large theme park for people who want to go back to the previous century soon, unless Europe starts to get its act together when it comes to AI.
So is what you're saying here that we need to get on board and start sorting out our military with AI systems?
Mother of all invention, Frank. Mother of all invention. So it is. Think of all the wonderful things that.
Yeah, I'm glad. I felt like we were agreeing on way too many things this week. So I'm glad that we were able to get to this big disagreement. But let's end on a couple of really quick, fun things to lighten the mood and get away from the military and using AI to potentially kill very specific people. So there was, I think, three fun things.
Yes.
Let's start with the Minecraft, the playable Minecraft game that is entirely generative AI. So I think it was a company called Oasis, I think the game is called Oasis. Yep. And it is, it's completely run through generative AI, but it's playable. However, it also just hallucinates crazily. And so, it's just, again, predicting what the screen should look like, the next screen should look like. And so players are finding that, they turn to the left and maybe dig a hole, and then they turn back around to the right, and it looks completely different because it's just hallucinated in an entirely different situation. So I think, you know, I think what was the headline?
Technology, Frank. It's a really impressive proof of technology. And have you ever wanted to walk through your own dreams? Because
Yes,
that's basically what you're doing. You know,
exactly. It
it's
does.
cool.
You know, there are two kind of points of view on it, which I think are interesting, because, you know, the fact that it hallucinates wildly like this, people are taking as proof that, you know, generative AI doesn't have a world model. It can't create this like world model of Minecraft. So it doesn't know, well, this is the state that that screen should be in because that's what it was in a minute ago. It's just kind of saying, well, what should it look like now? And there have been, you know, studies now to kind of prove what we, you know, we knew it already, but like LLMs just don't have a world model. They don't have a realistic world model.
I'm going to disagree with you here. I'm going to disagree with you, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So if you think about how LLMs have progressed as long as we've been talking, right? So where they used to hallucinate wildly over text, and, you know, the context windows were quite short. And even in the last 12 months, those context windows have got bigger and bigger and bigger. So that now when you ask a question, if you can give it a whole book now and you can ask it a question about a particular part in that book, it's able to recall that particular part of the book perfectly. These are large language models. They're trained on the internet, which is all text. They have no interaction with the real world. And you see that a lot of companies now are developing robots, right, that can interact with the real world. And I think one of the reasons is because they will then be able to train the robots based on, it's basically, you know, the AI is coming into its terrible twos, and it's learning how to interact with the world, and it'll fall over and it'll learn. And I think the same way, I think it's totally analogous that you have this idea of a context window, which now it can sort of search forwards and backs much more capably than it could before, and a real world model where you look at something, you turn away, and then you look back. Well, that's just context. And I think there's a lot of similarity between bigger context windows and a real world model.
Perhaps, but the current, but surely you would agree that the current large language models like don't have a real a world model, a reliable world model.
No, because they haven't been trained on real world data.
So there's a potential there, maybe, that they might get there, but right now it's not there. And that's what the Minecraft thing I think illustrates, is like, yeah, is it a glimpse at like what will be possible when a reliable world model is possible, or is it just further proof that actually we're not going to get to that reliable world model? And I'm not saying I lean one way or the other.
I'm going to disagree. Sorry, I'm just going to push back a little bit more, right? Because in another story that you had highlighted, it was these people had used a large language model to plan routes through New York City. And again, this was to say, oh, well, look, we're trying to prove that they don't have a real world model. So the language model would perfectly give you directions through New York City until they closed off 1% of the streets. And then it was terrible. It just, you know, it just didn't know what was going on. And they're like, there you go. You see, there's no real world model. Well, there's Tesla cars and there's Waymo cars, and they're driving around streets in California and in New York and in all sorts of places, and they have absolutely no problem figuring out when a road is closed. So, you know, by implication, is the corollary of what you're saying then that the language models that OpenAI use don't have a real world model, but actually Waymo and the Tesla ones do have a real world model because they find their way around when streets are closed.
I don't know, although I did see something saying that like Waymo are also very much like constrained to very, very specific routes and pathways. So that would indicate to me that, again, you know, yes, they can operate within within very specific confines, but that they could potentially be, you know, you can't just set them loose in the city and go anywhere, which would again indicate to me that no, they don't have a reliable world model.
Well, okay, we're not going to sort it out here, Frank, but I disagree. Tell me about. It's all about the money at the end of the day, right? Let's just talk about money, brass tacks. We need to make a robot to make art, Frank. What's going on in the art world?
Oh, this was amazing. So this was a humanoid robot artist called Ada, AI-DA. Her painting, I'm saying her, I should probably be saying it's, but obviously she's named after, I think, Ada Lovelace, who was a famous AI
first programmer ever, and she was before it was even popular.
And so she has a female form. She's quite scary looking because she has this kind of mannequin type head. Her eyes move. She has movement of the head. Her eyes move. Her mouth moves, but it's very, very basic movement, and it's kind of terrifying, especially when she's wearing a jumper. She has this kind of wig and mannequin type head, and then has these like exposed robotic arms. So they haven't tried to make the arms look in any way humanoid. To just have these like robotic arms. So she
Terminator on a bad day.
She looks kind of terrifying. But she works, she has a chat with the team, and they come up like together, they brainstorm ideas, and she decides on what she's going to paint. And then apparently she decided in discussions with the team that she was going to paint a portrait of Turing. And then she uses cameras in her eyes to look at a photograph of Turing, and then paints she's painted a beautiful series of images, and her portrait of Turing sold at auction. I think they were expecting it to go for like 150 grand, maybe 180 grand. $1 million it went for. And in fairness, it's actually it's a beautiful piece. But yeah, $1 million.
All right. We need to get to work, Frank. We need to make ourselves an art generator, or pretend that we've got an art generator, just make it ourselves and sell it as a piece of AI generated art.
And then the very last piece before we close out the episode, because we've gone way over time, is, Justin, did you go to the big Dublin Halloween parade?
I didn't, but I wanted to, like everybody else. What an interesting story. So for those who don't know, a company somewhere on the other side of the world, I can't remember exactly where it was, but they started to generate fake AI stories a number of months ago to say that there was going to be an enormous Halloween celebration in the center of Dublin on October the 31st, 2024. Nobody fact-checked these stories, and so the stories gained more and more momentum. They were totally fake. They ended up being the top search result on Google. Thousands of people turned up to Dublin, to O'Connell Street, stopping both Lewis lines based on a piece of fake AI news. That's
and the
real
police
world
here,
right there.
And the guards who are our police here had to come and disperse the crowd to get things back to normal for a completely non-existent Halloween parade. And apparently, I was reading somewhere, apparently, like, it was purely, this was purely, it wasn't somebody intentionally trying to make this happen or anything. They wanted to rank, I think, I don't know, were they selling Halloween stuff or what was going on, but they wanted to rank for Halloween terms. And they realized that it would be really easy to target Halloween parade in, and then just these cities that don't even have Halloween parades. And so that's what they were doing. They were just using AI to create content for terms that would rank that were Halloween related. And so they ended up, it was just like a snowball effect. One marketer that I follow was saying, this would actually be a really good indication, because Dublin doesn't have a Halloween parade, but this would be an indication that they should have one, because thousands of people came.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, the only thing I can say is, I mean, it's fascinating. The only thing I can say is we don't talk about politics around here, but given everything that's happened this week, the next 4 years are going to be incredible, and it's going to get more and more difficult to tell the difference between what's real and what's not. And it's going to be a hell of a ride. I can't wait. Frank, it's been a pleasure as always.
100%. I will see you next week. Have a good week in AI until then. Cheers.
See ya.